is week 9 of the spring trimester of 2017. I'm Jennifer Marie, and this is my Atelier diary. There's a workshop happening at my Atelier in Chicago. My instructor Magda is teaching it. I'll be assisting her. It's a 2-part workshop. You can either take one or both. There's a 2-week drawing workshop and then a 4-week painting workshop, and it's the steps on how to develop a drawing and how to develop a painting. So if you're interested in what we do at my Atelier, it's the same thing, just a really shortened, sped up version of it. I have all the information in the description box down below, also my email address if you have any questions or you want to register. All right, last week with my figure painting, I was talking about how I was working on the block-in for it and I wasn't too happy with the block-in. I was talking about how I was finding it hard to control all of these tones and to get the right transitions to make the light shape look really unified, the shadow shape look really unified. Though I was happier with my shadow shape. It was more the light shape and then the transitions going from the shadow shape into the light shape. And just kind of the technique and how I was putting the paint down was just looking sloppy, so I wasn't too happy with it last week. This week though, I feel like I cleaned it up a whole bunch and it's on the right track now. Some things that I did to do that was I was just painting more carefully, not using a ton of paint like I was the previous week. So using less paint, either scumbling or glazing, so I could kind of control what I was doing a little bit more, and working on just to get things to look more naturalistic, but being very careful with edge work and transitions so I could get the painting to look a lot more neat, unified, and not so choppy as I had it before. One other thing that helped me do this was Magda was looking at my palette that I had mixed up for the day, and she said when there were some colors on my palette that really jumped off in my mixtures, and so she was saying if I look at my mixtures and I squint my eyes at the palette, all the colors should unify pretty well and nothing should jump out too much. And I did have some mixtures that looked like they didn't fit in at all. It's been more sunny days, so the lawn's been looking more it's just been darker and more gray and not as colorful. So most of my mixtures were reflecting that, but I did have a few on my palette that it was just too much chroma and they just jumped out from my palette. So doing that helped a lot, being able to squint at my palette, and then if anything did jump off too much, I would see the mixture that I was trying to mix up and compare it again to nature, and so I might have to gray it down a little bit just so it fit in the palette that I mixed up. Alright, so on Monday, I worked on the portrait, the hands, and the feet. And Matt was saying that when I'm working on the portrait, it's good to work on the hands and feet at the same time. One, because the color mixtures should be pretty similar, because in those areas, they're usually more colorful and more red. So if you're mixing up for the face, you're gonna already have some colors that you can use for the hands and feet. But also, just so I'm not focused on one area for the whole entire day, but to keep jumping around the painting. So I'll work on the face for a little bit, then work on the hands and then the feet, so I can keep kind of circling around and working the whole of the painting and not get too like sucked into one detail. Also, I worked on the ribs and the stomach, and that area, I've been struggling with it, but I feel like I'm starting to get it better. Look a lot better with how the shapes are working. So in this pose, from my angle, you see the ribs and they're going around like this, and so that's one shape of that stomach region. But then you have the abdominal muscles that are going down, and it really does have a form coming off of it that's more vertical. So I'm trying to get this horizontal feeling of the upper part and then the more vertical feeling of the abdominal muscles as they go down. Tuesday, I forgot to take a photo at the end of this day. I don't remember exactly what I did on Tuesday, but Wednesday, here's the photo for Wednesday. And so what I did Tuesday and Wednesday is working in the lighter areas, so working across the chest, again working more in those ribs and the abdominal muscles in the stomach, and also the legs down to the knees. So I like how the painting's looking a lot better now, especially the light shape is looking a lot more unified, which I'm so happy about, because I feel like it was distractingly choppy then. So these days, a lot more happier with the whole painting because those more focal bright areas are getting a lot more unified feeling and a better effective light falling down it. I also worked on the background. So the background I kind of have been throwing in there as I'm painting along these past weeks, but I haven't really gone into the background and unified it yet. So I did that on Wednesday, and I darkened up the background as well, and I also mixed up a few different colors that I could be working into it because I want the background to be unified, but also not just a flat color behind Delon. I want to have it look like he's really sitting in a space. There's air all around him, so some parts are more purpley, some would go more green. Also, some parts are darker, some parts are lighter. And also on the floor that he is standing on, I lightened up that area, made it a little bit more blue, and got a shadow that's coming off of Delon that's being cast on the ground. It also kind of goes up. There's a stand that's right behind his leg, so I really loosely put that in there. So hopefully it's not too distracting, but it's also an interesting thing to look at as well. Also, I want to talk about something that has caused some happy accidents with this painting. So this day, I was especially feeling really tired and really burnt out. One, I had spent a whole lot of time on my final cast painting with the cherubs. Also, it's just the end of the school year, so I just feel just burnt out, really tired. And the Ravenswood Atelier, it's like a boot camp for painting and drawing, and it takes a lot of focus, a lot of concentration, and your schedule is just full of what you're doing, and it's just a rigorous schedule, and so it can be tiring, especially since it's the end of the year. So this day especially, I was just having trouble concentrating and focusing and keeping that really high level of focus of trying to be as accurate and specific painting wise to try and get the painting to look as much like Delon as possible, and just keeping that really high intense focus. I was just really struggling with it that day, so I just decided that I just wanted to have fun with the painting and kind of just maybe do things that I wouldn't normally do to just trying to get the effects down. But if I mess up the painting, that's okay. So I started doing things like for the arm that's down on his side, it's really unified. The side of his body and that arm really unify in together really well, especially when you're looking at him at nature. And especially if you squint just a tiny bit with your eyes, they look like it could be one shape as the colors kind of sweep across his body like that. So those areas, they were kind of dry, mostly dry I would say, but not completely. So I took my palette knife, and I wanted mine to look more unified, so I just took my palette knife and started scraping the arm into the stomach and the stomach back into the arm. And it did get this nice unified feeling to it, and also just an interesting painting effect when you got up close to the painting to actually see how the colors were being scraped together. Also, I was looking at my painting and I wanted to make the effect of light look better, more accurate, more believable, more beautiful. And I feel like as I was scanning my eyes down my painting, the part of Delon where it's the shadow that's, yeah, he has his arm raised, and the shadow that goes under his pec down his side, and that bent leg that comes out a bit, I wasn't quite happy with how it looked because it looked, the shadow that's dividing the top of the leg that's going into his torso, it just looked too divided, like that shadow was too dark, or it just made the light from the stomach into that bent leg looked too disjointed. And so what I did was I took a brush and put in a lighter shadow shape color onto it, and I think I used a dark halftone mixture as well. And I just took the brush and I started scumbling these lighter paint colors into the shadow starting at the top of, or the bottom of the stomach, working my way down that shadow shape where it goes into the bent leg, and really trying to spread light in that area, but keep it still looking like a shadow shape because it is a shadow shape. So I don't want it to look like form, like there's light in it, but more of a brighter, airier shadow area as it flows down. So I was taking my brush, and as the paint was being pulled off the brush, it kind of pulled off of it in unexpected, unpredictable ways, which some of it looked really, really cool, and I liked it a lot because it gave it this speckly look and this airy look, because it was, some parts were tiny little dots that were being pulled off the brush instead of it just being a flat brush stroke, so you could still see the darker shadow underneath, but this like lighter speckles of more colorful shadow, brighter shadow on top of it. So I liked how that looked, and I was just kind of not being too careful either, because I was saying I was tired, so I was just kind of doing that but liking the effect, so I just kept doing it in that area. Oh, also, so I had in the shape in the face, I had these highlights, and the highlights were looking too cut out on his head. So it was because the shadow, or the light shape of the highlight was too harsh, and it didn't have a soft edge that like blurred it out nicely. So I took my palette knife and I just kind of scratched paint out kind of in a hatching way. So I was more careful in this area than when I was unifying with my palette knife with the arm in the side. But kind of hatching like you would do in a drawing if you take a kneaded eraser and made it into a blade and just took paint away, or the charcoal away. I was doing the same thing with the palette knife there, and that gave it a lot more realistic effect. Thursday, Matt came by for critique, and we were talking about what I was doing the day before. He said he liked the effect that I was doing in the shadow shape, getting that speckly effect in some areas, but he was saying in other areas it was looking too splotchy and not as unified as it could be. So I saw what he was saying, and I guess it was two different ways that I was using the brush. In one way, I like how it looks more because it looks more unified and more impressionistic of what I'm actually seeing, and the other way was a little bit too careless, I think. So I just fixed up those areas to get them look a little bit more unified like the others. And again, I'm working in the light shape of the chest, the stomach, the legs, really trying to get the shadow shape. The shadow shape, or the light shape. The light shape is looking more unified, but now I'm trying to get the light shape to look more specifically Delon's actual body rather than a more generalized forms like I had before. And then on Friday, Magda came by for critique, and I asked her what I should do for Delon's portrait, because I feel like I've been having trouble getting Delon's portrait down right. It never the values never look right, because his face it's really bright, and I've always had trouble with it, and I told her that I've painted Delon 3 times and I've never been happy with how I've done his portrait before, because when I do it, it almost looks like when someone has a full face of makeup on and they contour their face a lot with darkening areas and then highlighting areas, and I said it kind of looks like that kind of stylized makeup look. And she was telling me that Delon's face is dark, and all of the values are darker than what I have, except for the highlights are really bright. So when you're looking at Delon, his face looks bright because the highlights are so bright. But so what I had then was everything going really bright, the highlights and the midtones and everything, and then it would be a fast transition from the light shape into the shadow shape. But she was showing me that it was actually highlights are really bright, and what the highlights are sitting on are a lot darker and more richer color than what I had. So there's a lot slower transitions as that darker light shape goes into the shadow shape. So she was showing me how to paint that, and she took my brushes and my palette and was showing me what she was saying and explaining, and I'm really glad that she did that, because it made a ton of sense watching her do that, it helped a lot, especially since I've been struggling a lot painting Delon's face. So that was a good lesson to learn, to try and imagine the face without the highlights so you can get the actual value of it correct, and then laying in those really bright highlights on top of. And now for my afternoon project. So I finished my cast painting the week before, so I'm now starting into still life. The first still life you do is a pear project, and it's a memory exercise. So you have a pear, a Bosch pear, that's those brownish colored pears because they look more like flesh than the green ones. So you take a brown pear and you put it up on your stand, and you take a piece of canvas and you paint that for 1 week and try and get it to look as much like the pear as possible. You get a fresh piece of canvas and you do everything that you did in 1 day, and then you get a fresh piece of canvas again, you take the pear down and you do it all from memory in 1 day. So you should have 3 pear paintings at the end of the day. And I think the last painting that you do, the memory one, is supposed to look the best because you kind of simplified all of these things that you've done with it previously, studying it, and you're painting only what you remember as the impression of it, so the beautiful aspects of the pear that you remember. Long story short, I am going to be delaying my pear project. I'm either going to be doing it over summer break or after summer break as my first thing that I do when school starts again, because I'm just feeling too burnt out and tired, and I can't have that high intensity of focus that I usually do at school. But I did start the pear project, and I think it was Thursday where I was just like, I can't do this right now. I need a break. So I think it's best for my mental health to just give myself a break in the afternoons and do it later. And I think I'll get more out of it as well, because I feel like I'm going through the motions of painting and not really thinking about what I'm doing, and not really remembering what I'm doing at the end of the day either. So I think it's just better to wait on it. And for the extras, this is what I did for the portrait class. I originally had her face a lot larger on the canvas, but as I was working and correcting the shapes, it just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And it took a while to get the shapes to be more accurate and look more like her, more specific and not generalized. It still doesn't look like as much like her as I wanted to, but she's coming in for another day, I think 1 more session. So I have another day to work on this, and we'll see how it turns out.